should interconnect it. I mean, but you know, John, of course, all the royal families of Europe are connected that way. I mean, that's the way how the system works. Even with the Romanovs in Russia, you know, the Bourbons, the Parm, the Habsburgs, the Windsors, they're in fact they're all one big family.
And probably these relationships are born on the backs of not freedom, but they're prisoners of their own system, and that being a financial system that causes them to have to marry within each other in order to protect their financial autocracy. And instead of saying theocracy, but their empire, their financial empire is protected by them continuing to marry within each other. Are you following me?
Yeah, I am.
So that family continues to keep their contracts, so to speak, with each other, because that just comes with being part of the family. Otherwise, their dynasty would fall and they would lose power. Tell us a little bit about what you found out about the financial part. You've done a lot, it sounds like, in that area. The financial dealings of our governments and the hidden agendas of the money and so forth. Now, I understand you got a new book, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked me about this because I wanted to talk about this from the beginning, but then we came to talk about the Bilderbergers and the royal family, which is also very interesting. The more so because the royal family also has very big corporate interests, of course. I mean, that's one of the very strange things to explain to Americans, that we have like companies which have like the predicate royal, you know, like for instance that you have like in American companies like Royal Google or something like this. Yeah, it exists. And that means that there is some connection between the royal family and this company. Like for instance, the biggest oil company of the world, it's called Royal Dutch Shell.
Right.
You know, and our queen is one of the biggest shareholders, and also she visits sometimes herself or with proxy people, also meetings of shareholders, and she has a really big influence on the dealings of Shell. She even, it's a very big story. But the book you asked me, it is going to the press next week. It's about, this is one of my specialties, it's about accountants. That's another story about, you know, the big four, big accounting firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young and KPMG. You know about these guys?
They used to be called, didn't they call them the Big Eight or something like that?
Yeah, they used to be the Big Eight, but then they started merging. So now they are the Big Four.
Oh, the Big Four, okay.
Yeah, sometimes there are jokes that it will be the big one in a couple of years. Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about what you're finding out and what your book's about.
Absolutely. My book is, I think it's never written before a book like this, because it's about corporate fraud and corporate misdemeanor. I mean, of course, there are written many books about these subjects in America, even maybe whole libraries of it. But what makes my book very special, I think, is that I write the stories exclusively from the perspective of the accountants, of the controlling external accountant, which has the obligation by law to control the data, the financial data of these listed companies independently on behalf of what they call the stakeholders. And who are the stakeholders? Of course, they are the people who own shares of this company and bonds, but also the people who work in this company, the working force, the stakeholders. I mean, everyone having a stake in a company, you can call these people stakeholders. So accountants are working for these stakeholders to give them right information about the financial situation of these companies. I mean, that's very basic, a very basic concept. These financial reporting systems are used by people who want to invest in the company, because normally people do some research before they decide to buy stock.
Like a Dun & Bradstreet or something. Well, we're going to take an opportunity to let you know that you're listening to the Waterman Files, and that break that we had interruption, I don't know if it'll show up or not, but we are still here, and we're talking to Mika Kott, who is has a new book out, and I think probably we're talking about accounting corruption and corruption in the financial reporting sectors of like the big four accounting firms and in the world. And I'm going to let him continue talking about where he left off. He'd been saying that the reports report supposedly the status of corporations and other entities, even government, and that they are supposed to be responsible to give you the truth. I'm suspecting that's not the case, but I'm going to let him continue talking. Go ahead and continue with your book there, your information.
Yeah, thank you, John. I just was telling that, of course, the law has organized it, seemingly very well in that all listed companies and also even non-listed companies are obliged by law to give, financial reports every now and then for the stakeholders in which they are supposed to give correct information about their financial situation. Well, of course, it has been a long-standing practice also in America that this information turns out to be false. That's why we have the phenomenon of the restatement. I think you're familiar with that concept. That means that companies do acknowledge that their information was false. They say this far it has come already, John, that companies just very easily say, okay, it was false. We misstated our results with $675 million. So now we're going to restate our results. That's how they do it. They just say, okay, we take back our first reporting and then we give a restatement. That means we give a new. This is of course a very stupid and even catastrophic situation. But as I describe in my book, that in the biggest companies, it so happens that the accounting firms, which are paid a lot of money to do their work, I say to do their work, but in fact they are paid a lot of money to not do their work. That's
probably a lot of money to misreport and misrepresent.
Exactly, John. That's the case. And I give 13 case studies from very well-known companies like Xerox, WorldCom, Sendent, Tyco, Enron, Sunbeam, but also European companies like Parmalat, Ahold, Leonard and Houspie, in which it's very well documented that the accountants and the management together made a conspiracy to really defraud the stakeholders and to really, in a criminal scheme, to falsify the books of the company. This was really a well-known fact, but what makes my book interesting is that it's really described in detail exactly how this works, how they do it, and what is the role of the controlling partner, of the CFO, the chief financial officer, of the chief accountant of the firm, of the counsel, the external counsel of the law firm, of the SEC, how all these players work. And also, John, I describe very detailed what happens when the fraud is exposed. Because then,
so you're basically saying that those that handle the numbers might actually fudge those numbers to misrepresent even to a major stockholder. Say, for example, the Queen of Holland might have a 51% stake in something, and as opposed to getting